scheduled to join us. We are on the hour.
Okay. Maybe we just go ahead and get started. John will join us.
Oh, we can see you, Alex. Hey, how are you? And he's probably stepping out of the OR. Who knows? Okay, so I'm going to kind of do a warm transfer while we kind of wait for our last panel member, but we do have a lot of participants online. So I want to kind of introduce Tom Clemens, who I met when I joined the VA only 11 years ago. And Tom is a senior research career scientist and spent a lot of time in orthopedics and has traveled all over the country, and is now resident at the Baltimore VA and the University of Maryland School of Medicine. He will be joined, we hope, by John Adams, who is semi-retired out there in UCLA. And the reason we asked John to come is, of course, Tom knows him really well, but I'm the recipient of many of the folks, surgeon scientists, who have passed through John's program there at UCLA. We have Dr. Amendola, who is at the Richmond VA. I sat with Dr. Amendola at the Association of VA Surgeons. So again, really important to hear what he's doing with our surgical residents, and of course with their work in the 3D printing network. So again, a different perspective. I'm really happy. Hicham Drissi has joined us. Again, he's a VA researcher as well as full professor at Emory. He's at Atlanta VA. And Hicham holds a special place in my heart because he was going to nurture one of my spine surgeons through career development. And let's not cry. Melina, I got to meet Melina at the other end of her career, but she did start off VA career development. She is one of our success stories. She won the PCASE, which is a Presidential Early Career in Science and Engineering, and it's something that the VA really likes to promote. In the federal space, the type of researchers, kind of the future of medicine people that we're going to put forward, and Melina's one of those winners. But she's going to tell us, and I think you couldn't find a bigger advocate for academic medicine and surgery. And Melina's also sort of the editor on JAMA, a great supporter of surgeon scientists. So again, love to hear her perspective on what more we can do for our surgeon scientists. And then we have Karl Scheidt. Again, I met Karl out there in Wisconsin at, again, the Association of VA Surgeons. And Karl kind of said, tell me what I can do to help. Karl, thank you and appreciate it. Again, really looking forward to hearing what you have to say. And we kind of pulled Joe Wallace into this, maybe slightly reluctantly. He's acting dean of the School of Medicine in Indianapolis, and also a VA researcher. And again, to hear kind of an engineering a perspective on training and mentoring of our surgeon scientists. And with that, anything else, Tom? No, I'm going to just hand it over to you. Okay.
So thanks a lot, everybody, for joining. This is a tremendous panel, and this is an area that I think it seems like my whole life I've been working, my whole academic life I've been working on this. I've always been in clinical departments, and so it's a thing we've been working on. And John Adams is my brother in arms. We kind of have used the training grants to try to bridge this gap a little bit as best we can, but there are other things that we want to discuss today that we need to do to bring these troops back together to re-engage the surgeons. So I gave you a rough agenda. I don't want this to be the be all and end all. I just wanted to use it as a guide because this is a round table. We want to hear from everybody, but I thought it would be useful if I start off the meeting by really defining what you all know is the problem, how we got to that this once collaborative physician scientist, basic science machine was the academic institution, came apart. How did that happen? So I'll do that in 5 minutes. And then in the second part, I think it's important to hear from each one of you. Some of you have slides. It doesn't matter if you don't, but to give your experience and your impression of the problems that you see at your institution, because not every institution is the same. I found very big differences when I left Hopkins coming to Maryland. And certainly some subspecialties don't have the problems that surgeons do, especially orthopedic surgeons with these high volumes just don't allow them to do research. So to give your experience at your institution. And then the third part, I think we should spend the most time on what are some mechanisms. There are some that we've tried and I think work, but there are others that we need to think about. And so that's the third part. We should probably really have a lot of discussion about that. And then at the end, Kimberly will tell us, what the next steps are going to be. So let me just spend a few minutes just to go to the first slide. And how did we get to this mess, what we call a bench to bedside gap? You all know that really the history of medical schools in this country started, the early medical schools, the successful ones, the Yales, the Hopkins, really took the Vienna model where education, research, and clinical care took place at the same place. I mean, Alsler coined the term residence. A resident should reside in the hospital. And so that was the idea. And that really, created this collaborative arrangement. That was a guiding principle of these big research institutions around the medical schools. The other thing that really drove the U.S. medical biomedical research program was in the 50s. The NIH, and I should mention NSF as well, but later. But the NIH actually was there, but they didn't have grant programs until the 50s. And they started diverting, federally approved funds to fund investigator-initiated research at academic and medical centers. And that allowed them to become research-intensive campuses. And in that environment, there was a close interaction between clinical science and basic discovery people, basic scientists, PhDs and MDs work together. Just to note that, when I trained long ago, it was routine that in both clinical and basic departments had the opposite. In other words, there were jointly appointed PhDs and MDs in the same department often, and they would encourage the collaborative arrangements in projects. And that, again, for translational projects, you needed that. And I should mention that training programs typically supported both. I trained on one at Mass General, T32 ran by John Potts, had both people. John Adams was on the same training that I was. So this was a wonderful environment, and that was all working very well. And if you go to the next slide, what happened? In around the 70s, and you can debate exactly when it happened, two things coincided that really disrupted this. The first was the kind of reduction in federal funding, and the coincidental reduction in reimbursement of revenues. Clinical revenues went down. There were caps on Medicare and so forth, pressuring clinical faculty, especially surgical faculty, to prioritize, the clinical duties, the billable activities, at the expense of their research. And then the other thing that people aren't necessarily aware of, but in the 70s at the same time, PhD or basic science departments, their training programs, this is when molecular biology really came into the fore, and it prompted them to really focus on the molecular training and molecular sciences and molecular biology, and really de-emphasize, pathobiology in medicine. I remember people coming into my lab didn't know where a spleen was on a mouse because they just didn't think that was going to be important. So there was the two things happened together, which really, I think most people know the first one, but the second one, I don't think people know that happened. And you remember, that was when physiology became molecular and cellular physiology, pharmacology, molecular and cellular pharmacology. They went the other direction, and that separated it. This produced this what we called the bench to bedside gap, where basically what you had is you created, they didn't work together anymore. And that I think was one of the that had a lot of direct and indirect consequences, as shown on the next slide. And so the direct ones were, basically today, especially again in surgical departments, and most importantly in orthopedic surgery, few surgeons have enough time. They don't have protected time to conduct significant research, and they don't do it. They are not doing research after they train. They have some research project when they train, as all residents do, but after that, everything disincentivizes their involvement in research. So at the same time, what happened with PhD training programs, because of the thing I just talked about, they failed to get a real grounding in pathobiology and medicine, such that their ability to conduct translational research and applied research, really wasn't there. They didn't have the skill set, so they entered the workforce without that. And these things together were at least one aspect that slowed, I think, the translation of basic discoveries into clinical practice. Not everything, but that was clearly these factors did that. The other thing, people who have thought about this, and I've done a lot in writing training grants, we've written a number of training grants to try to use them as a mechanism to at least engage surgeons again. There's trickle-down effects of this problem. One is we looked at the amount of content in musculoskeletal pathobiology in medical school, and it's decreasing, primarily because the surgeons really aren't involved anymore as much in teaching and so forth, and that's not good. you have, basically orthopedic residents almost never enter ND PhD programs because it's just disincentivized. And that's a shame, so these are the problems that we're stuck with. And so, do I have one more slide? Is that it? So some things have been done. I mean, you remember Zerhouni and the recognition that the translation was slowing. This prompted the government to spend a lot of money on the CTSAs to promote interdisciplinary collaborations. If you look at the what's been published and what's the research that's been done on the effectiveness of these big awards, yet is relatively modest. It's not as good as what that may end up taking years to come to realize the gains, but so far it's modest in terms of speeding translation of basic science to clinical practice. Now the other thing in the CTSAs, there are these K awards, but they're really completely out of the purview of orthopedic surgeons because they don't have protected time. So they're really useless to them. Again, other subspecialties are different, where basically an anesthesiologist can actually have more protected time. And then on the PhD training side, and I'm just bringing that up because I think about it, I think you have to think of the two things together, the PhDs and the MDs. You have to bring them together. There have been a number of efforts to recognizing that the PhDs that are graduating don't know much about clinical, pathobiology anymore. And so there was a grant there was a grant initiative funded by the Howard Hughes Medical Institute called Med to Grad. And that program was not intended to be long-term, but it was intended to fund, I think they had 25 or 30 centers, grants initially. And I had one at UAB, and those were designed to bring PhDs and team them up with clinician scientists. And they work very well. The research that's done, the evaluations of that program is actually much better. They're showing increased placing of graduates in translation. You can do it a number of ways. You can kind of look at how you've changed the trajectory or the behavior of the graduates by looking at where they publish, what kind of jobs they enter, and so forth. And that the early data out of those programs is encouraging. So it suggests that one can, again, by using a training approach, change this, or at least close slightly the bench to bedside gap. But the problem that really is a stickler is the surgeon. So I want to spend now. That's the one I think that's harder to solve, and it's simply a time problem. Okay. So I have some ideas, but I think with that introduction, and if anybody wants to chime in but I would like to hear from each of the panelists about their experience and what they see the real problems at their institution, and if you have any ideas, if you had experience in trying things, let us hear about that now. And I guess do you want to begin with who wants to begin?
Well, do we have John Adams on the line? Has he joined us?
No,
not yet. Okay. So,
well, somebody's talking. I can call him. Do you want me to do that?
Okay, go ahead. Did you want to pick on somebody?
Yeah, let me pick on somebody.
Let's just pick on somebody.
Let's see. Melina, you're up. By the way, Melina, I hear really good things about what you're doing at UVA.
So thank you. I'm not sure you want to start with me because I have very strong opinions on this topic.
Well, we want strong opinions.
Well, okay. So if you really want to, I agree with everything that you said, but I'm going to say that the root of the problem, though, everything comes down to money. Mm-hmm. And so the problem, right, it's not that we don't have surgeons that are interested. Trust me, we have surgeons that are interested, even in orthopedics and with regenerative medicine, there are plenty. The issue is that research does not compensate the higher paid specialties at their true rate because we have the NIH cap. Right. I am an advocate for eliminating the NIH cap on salary. If you do that and you pay true salary and true effort, trust me, that would change everything. Because what is I'm talking about everything, not just K awards, but all NIH awards, right, even ours. Because the problem, and I see Joe Wallace shaking his head, because I know in your current role, you know what I mean, and all of you know what I mean. It is whether or not you are in an institution that has leaders that are willing to pay for that cost share delta. And it is in very tight financial times that we are in right now, with so many healthcare systems being negative because of COVID. It's even more relevant today than it was pre-COVID, but it was still an issue pre-COVID. And so it really takes those leaders who believe in it and are willing to spend that money. And if you have leaders that do not believe in it and support it, it's just not going to happen. Because to pay that cost share for a surgeon, God forbid an orthopedic surgeon and a neurosurgeon, which are the two highest compensated specialties that we have, it's a lot of money. K awards, so we would have the pipeline, same thing. K awards don't even come close to paying the true salary. So it comes down to, again, money. So I would love if this group, if we had a product coming out of this group today, is an advocacy to eliminate the NIH salary cap in entirety. Sign me up. I can even help be the face of it. But then I would say there's a couple, everything comes down to money. So the issue of exposure, I will say, so there's the pipeline issue, and that we need to expose our trainees. You hit on this also, Tom, in your talk. That also comes down to money. Who is going to pay for those residents? Let's use ortho as your example, because very few do this. For those residents to take 2 years out, either in the middle of the end of their residency, someone has to pay for it. And right now our government does not do that. So it comes down to money. And if we had programs that actually paid the full salary for those residents while they're in the lab for those 2 years, our T32 training grants also have a cap. So it comes back to money.
But can I just jump in and say, I completely agree, and we're not going to solve that. For the surgeon, we're not going to solve, it's the time issue and the money. We're not going to solve that. We could do other things though. Time, like create teams and so forth.
I'm going to push back. Why can't we solve this? Why can't
the cap is a good idea, but I don't.
NIH, right? And the VA would follow. Why can't we advocate?
I have to jump in.
Yeah.
The VA, as Hicham knows, pays the full salary. It's the VA salary is right. So yes, it is.
Pays the full VA salary.
Right.
VAs, a full
right. I mean, we are not the private sector. We are the VA, but it is definitely, we pay the full VA salary. So
just a comment on the trainees. John Adams and I have both written T32s and had them funded and refunded, where we do take a step out resident and we only do 1 year. We ignore the 2-year rule. Yeah. And we got them funded. So you can bring somebody out 1 year and pay for them in a T32 situation. But
you hear where I'm going. And then the last,
I agree.
Before I give it to someone else, is that the other big issue on the training grants, and here, Kimberly, I think you might agree with me, both the VA and the NIH, to my knowledge, unless it changed recently, still have the number of years that you have to be within a certain number of years of your final training to apply for the career development award. In today's day and age, that should be eliminated.
Stupid. Yeah.
So I already told Tom, right, for surgeons, Dr. Bever you can waive that amount, waive that years, because we understand that there are many more years. So let's not make these blanket statements between VA and NIH.
But the academic setting is different. So that's a good point too. And your ideas about really putting, going after these sacred cows, I think is a good idea.
Right, because why does that exist? There's no reason, even for non-surgical specialties, to have that number of years, because you might have a really bright person who went 100% clinical, but then has a great experience, say 4 or 5 years into their faculty job, and they actually have the skill set to do research. Right now, those training grants, they could not apply. So I would say eliminate. So I know I'm saying some bold stuff here.
No, that's good. That's
money,
good.
Eliminate the salary cap, and eliminate years of training. I'm done. Okay.
That's great. Thank you. That's another right on point. And I think the T32 is such an ancient, it has not changed since I trained on my T32, how many years ago, and they're stupid rules, and they really, so we ignored them, but they're really, and what we wanted to do when Steve Katz was still alive at NIAMS, we had intended, John and I, to create a meeting at NIAMS knock them over the head and say, you got to change these rules for these grants or nothing's going to happen. But very good points.
Thank you, Tom. Kimberly knows how much I love nonsensical rules.
All right.
Okay, so who wants to go next? Just jump in.
So I'm gonna jump in. I'm in full agreement with both of you, and I can understand Melina's perspective about compensation being an issue. And with subspecialties, my experience has been that depending on what that subspecialty compensation is on real market, it's been very difficult. So if you put a spine surgeon at 8/8 to be able to work within a VA facility, and then expect that they're going to do also research, which is an advantage of being within that VA facility, because their workload as a physician may be a little bit lower than their partner in whatever institution, and their compensation is going to be 3 to 4 times lower than people after 5 years that they have helped recruit to whatever university that is. That there's going to be an issue. Sooner or later, we're going to have that issue. And so I think finding a balance where we can leverage the two kind of sources of income, the number one being the university affiliate, and then having access to providing services that will be compensated for appropriately, and then using the VA as a complementary, true partnership where, you know, the cap for the NIH does not apply. The issue that we have is there is no equivalent of a K award. There is a CDA, and so maybe we need to imagine CDAs that would be personalized. Would be eventually one potential solution, and I think that you can do that with the VA eventually, and it's going to be very difficult for NIH because we want the cap to disappear. That is going to disappear. We have the other problem, Melina, which is if you tell a PI that they need to write a 5 million grant for which a PhD is willing to get $1 million, then there is an issue. And we see that. I saw this. I've started a lab 20 years ago, and I had a lab in 3 different institutions since then, and all of them were in orthopedics. So I'm not speaking about Emory Orthopedics, where I am vice chair of research. I'm talking also about my experience when I was at the University of Rochester and my experience when I was at the University of Connecticut. And I can clearly tell you that also the culture of the place is going to matter. Number one, what does protected time mean? It means different things to different leaders. And so we need to have a unified kind of language when we talk about research time. The VA allows you to do research as a physician. I don't think that every school is incentivized to actually allow you to do research at a very high capacity automatically, and it depends on the culture of the place. So that has been my personal observation, and maybe we need to think about educating the leadership in terms of the importance of research. And as you know, department chairs, they can be pro-research, but non-researchers.
Right.
Then we have anti-research, and that's very rare, thankfully, right? Or has a very esoteric kind of idea of what research means. And then you have a few people, and I had the privilege of working with some of them, and Randy Rosier, who recruited me to Rochester, was one of them, who had a plan, and the plan for the physician scientist actually to exist, and then after him, Regis O'Keefe has been somebody who was a very strong advocate for the researcher. So I think the culture, the compensation, the decision to put what type of researcher, scientist, physician scientist in what environment starts to matter. And then having conversations that are kind of reasonable about expectation in terms of compensation through grants. I think that's also a major point. I'm going to give perhaps an example of a first encounter that I had with a PGY1 who got into my office and said, I want to use aptamers to decrease degenerative disc disease. I almost fell off my chair. And he goes, do you do disc research? And I said, now I do. I didn't before, but now that I am exposed to you, I want to do this research. And so that person went ahead and started doing research, and as a physician scientist has done outstanding research, and started becoming maybe one of the very few epigeneticists, spine surgeons that I've met. Just hearing this is kind of wow. So talk about dedication, right? But then for family reasons, and perhaps some of them being linked to compensation, which is the reason why I absolutely agree with Melina and I respect your point of view about this, ended up the most promising person, ended up in private practice. And I had no clue what actually happened, right? So maybe the responsibility for us also as a research community is to provide an environment where we're actually promoting physician scientist growth, and how can we partner with funding agencies to make that kind of environment also acceptable by leadership within partnering institutions is something that we need to certainly work towards.
Just to point out that Melina, you and you had a similar point about the leadership, which is really important. That let's keep note of the things that are common. It's the money, but it's also, I mean, we have a new dean, Mark Gladwin at University of Maryland, and he, for the first time, is giving 10%. So if you're a PI and a training grant, they'll give you 10% of your salary. It's not much, but he recognizes this problem, and I think those kind of there are a few enlightened leaders. I think we have to get more of them. So just to note that commonality. John's joined.
You are absolutely correct on that, and I think that it takes the leaders being willing to put the money out there. I mean, I'm doing the same. I would be a hypocrite, right, if I did not do the same. So we're actually paying for cost share. I actually have a neurosurgeon on a K, and actually may have two. So, but it's very costly. But it's because me and my boss above me both are surgeon scientists ourselves, and so we get it. But that's rare.
Right, and that's what I call the culture, and then I think that the last point that I think is important is to educate the partners, and so by that I think that partnership between MDs and PhDs has worked pretty nicely within the VA microsystem, and so what kind of research are we expecting to have? And so educating the other counterpart, who is the other partner, that all research is important, in my humble opinion, has been maybe at the root of some issues. We cannot say that basic fundamental research is the only research or the best research. There is no best research and worse research. There is good research, and there is hopefully soon to be better research. And so I think that once you start thinking that way, the model that would work eventually, and I want to hear from everybody about, is the notion of peer mentorship has become so powerful nowadays, where actually we are now creating incubators. I've started something. We have a dinner where every subspecialty is going to come, and then we're going to have the basic fundamental scientists come to that dinner, and we're going to say, what are the things that keep you awake at night? And instead of forcing pairing and assigning mentorship like the traditional system has kind of taught us to do, we have them select partnerships. So here is where I found an issue with the VA system, is that if you're not a VA physician, it's very hard for you to be credentialed to be able to do research at a VA facility, even if your partner is a VA scientist. And so I think that once we start thinking about this holistically rather than one specific problem, as everybody is identifying that there are some problems worse than others, the worst problem is the lack of opportunity. So a department chair that says work-life balance, that doesn't mean anything to me. Protected time doesn't mean anything to me. Go home and write your grant on your vacation with your family and so on and so forth. That's going to continue being an issue, and it's for us, those of us who are in leadership, to kind of educate their own institutional leadership about the importance of the physician scientist. We're not going to forward translate well if we don't reverse translate. If I don't learn about the disease, I can't do anything that's meaningful for the veteran. Yeah, I can tell you what protein touches another protein to do what. Yeah, I can do that. And NIH will fund me to do that. But I think that having a thorough understanding of what it takes for the physician scholar to be within the veteran system, to actually work for that veteran, just like I, PhD, work for that veteran, is going to be essential.
Let me pick up on one of the things that a good point you made, and this is this issue of the appreciation of the basic scientists and clinical scientists, knowing what each other is doing and the value and valuing it. I'm going to introduce John Adams, who came in. He's my brother in arms, and he's developed, and I've kind of taken it from him. Try to use the training grant as a mechanism, not only to bring people together, but also to mentor. You can design that into a good training program. And the thing about a training grant is, guess what? If you give somebody money and tell them to go away and create mentorships, it'll disappear. But if you give them a grant that they have to renew, then somebody's under the gun to renew it. So John, could you tell us a little bit about your program? And I just want to let him go now because it came up in your points.
And unmute, John. You need to unmute yourself.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Good morning, everyone. Sorry I was late. Had some connectivity problems here. But I have no experience with the VA at all. I should let everybody know that to begin with. But I do have a lot of experience with NIH-funded training grants. And when I first moved to UCLA in 2007, in 2008, I started writing a T32 in the Department of Orthopedic Surgery. And initially it was just a garden variety postdoctoral training grant. It was to train MD, PhDs. Oh, here it is. So we're now in our 13th year. Can you go forward?
Yeah.
And the basic theme was, as many of you know, is the new frontier in orthopedic research at that time, and continues to be, that of team science. This idea of a one scientist, one lab, one grant kind of way to run science no longer works in modern day medicine. And so for us, we actually focused on regenerative medicine, and instead of having little arrows going between the various participants, everybody just collaborated in a single effort around a regenerative medicine trainee. If you go to the next slide for me, thank you. Okay, great. So for us, we sort of envisioned a research triangle, and that the foundation of the T32 was really built upon our close neighbors at UCLA. And so we built our T32 using orthopedic surgery, the Broad Stem Cell Research Center, and the Department of Developmental Biology. Next slide. And NIAMS had a big problem at that time. And Steve Katz, who was then the director of NIAMS, came to me and said, you know, John, of all of the surgical subspecialties, academic orthopedic surgeons generate the fewest career research grants on a per capita basis of any surgeon, any surgical subspecialty. And he said, do you think you could build something into your training grant that will help us solve this problem? So that's what I did. And you can go to the next slide. This is how we restructured the orthopedic surgery residency training program to fit our T32 and to fit the requirements of orthopedic surgery accreditation. So the way we structured this to accommodate orthopedic surgery residents, which you know have normally a 5-year training program, we actually took them through the residency in year 1 and in year 2, and then in year 2 they had to submit a competitive research grant where they identified their mentor team and their projects that included at least 2 specific aims. The first specific aim was generally a basic aim, something that was done at the bench or with an animal model of orthopedic disease. And in order to do that, they had to step out during their 3rd year of their training. Now, luckily for us, 2 of our residents were forced to step out during their 3rd year and asked to do research. But to tell you the truth, many of them just wanted to go out and moonlight, maybe write a case report or 2, and then come back into the residency in year 4. So they used to flip coins to do this. So the 2 people that lost, or the 2 people who got the shortest straw, had to go out. And then when we started the training program, when we told them, well, if you make it onto the training grant, we can get you $35,000 tax-free for NIH repayment. And why do you want to go out and do that and work, you know, and do clinical medicine and write a case report if you can actually get paid more by going on the training grant? And so they came back into the training grant and they undertook their first aim, which was usually basic. Sometimes it was computer science based. And then they went back into the residency training program for their 4th year, and during the first part of their 5th year. And then during the latter part of their 5th year, they came back on the training grant without having to give up time to the orthopedic surgery residency credit, to their credit. And they actually undertook the 2nd aim of their application, which was usually a sort of a translational or clinical project that was tied to their basic idea and the basic specific aim 1. And then they went back into the residency in year 6, and then after that, they obviously competed for their clinical residency programs, and then went on to compete for places in academic orthopedic surgery. And I can tell you so far, we've graduated 6 of these individuals. 5 of them have actually found their way back into academic institutions on the faculty at academic institutions and are working on their K grants. One of them actually, to our dismay, went out into private practice. So this is not an all or nothing thing, but so far through the first 6 trainees that we've gotten to the point of their faculty positions, 5 of them have remained in academic university training slots. Next. And so just, you might imagine, what's really attractive to an orthopedic surgery resident is to be able to attack an orthopedic disease along a translational continuum. And in our program, we actually got a bunch of basic scientists or MD PhDs who were doing animal models of human disease and actually helped them work with our research residents on a human disease to create an animal model of that human disease and then go back and forth in sort of this translational circle. Next slide. So in our training grant, we actually created a T32 bubble. That's what we call it. And whether you're a basic scientist trainee or whether you're an orthopedic resident, you both compete for a position on the training grant. We now have 5 slots up every year to compete for. And we pair that trainee with a funded clinical scientist, with an academic orthopedic surgeon, and then with an NIH-funded translational or basic scientist. And at the end of that, what actually ends up being a sort of a 3-year training program, our product is actually a translational scientist who can then go on to compete for mentor awards, either in the VA or with the NIH awards. And I think that's all I wanted to say at this point, but this is a model that we've used to actually build our own orthopedic surgeon scientists rather than depending on luck to get them into the system. And it's worked pretty well. And I think, Tom, your experience.
Yeah, and I was going to make the point, John, that again, we basically plagiarized your idea, but every institution's different. And for Hopkins, for example, the step-out resident, we had a step-out resident, but it was really difficult. So at Maryland, I'm writing one now, and I'm probably not going to do that. There are different ways to do it, and it depends very much on the institution and what you can and can't do. John has once it gets going, once the culture is beginning to change, it's out there, and the people who want the resident, the rare resident that wants to do research will come there, but that takes a long time. So everyone's going to have to be modeled differently. But the point of John's, I guess my experience has been, is you can use this relatively modestly small grant. I mean, it's ridiculously small. They don't pay for anything except slots. But the idea that you can use it to at least make a dent into this problem, I think, is useful.
Yeah, I can tell you now, the orthopedic surgery residents, the 2 that have to step out during the year, they're always competing for our T32 slots now. None of them are doing, the go off and do locum tenens work or write case reports or do small retrospective studies. They're all engaging in prospectively designed basic and translational research, and they want to do it. And so we frequently have to turn down some of those residents because we have better qualified candidates that might be PhDs or MD PhDs. But it's worked really well. And I can tell you our residency training program is very grateful because we're able to pay on the training grant for essentially 2 slots out of their 6-year training program.
And these interdigitate very well if you have a P30, the core center, NIAM sponsors these P30s called core centers. And then if you're lucky enough to get 2 of those together, they really synergize very well. But anyway, somebody else can talk about that if they want. Thanks, John. That was excellent. Carl, do you want to go ahead?
Sure. Let me get my slides up here. You've really piqued some of my interest and thoughts in regards to this. All right, do you see my slides?
Yes.
Okay, so this is basically kind of my thoughts as an orthopedic surgeon, and I come at it from a little bit different point of view, considering I was studied engineering in college, went to medical school, did orthopedic residency, and then went straight into private practice. So I didn't really have a huge research. And then I did a fellowship late in my career, and post-fellowship came to the VA 8 years ago and have been section chief for about 5 years. And in our program here, we have typically 3 residents that are full-time with us, and the interns rotate a month at a time, and then we get periodic medical students. And since I've been here, we've written a few papers and been doing mostly QIP type projects, some research, usually retrospective. And, you know, my thoughts from my point of view is there's so much potential within our department to do research. A lot of it relates to our captive patient population, and they're captive and they tend to stick within the VA system, and so you can data mine that information out. And, you know, from the VA's core principles, you know, quality care is there, but, you know, how do we measure quality of care? And from an orthopedic point of view, in the private sector, we talk about centers of excellence designations, and now to get that from the Joint Commission, you have to belong to a national registry. You got to follow your patients along, and the VA doesn't do that for orthopedics. And the whole thing of VA care, encouraging the veterans to choose VA, yet they can choose to go into the community. How do we keep them within the system? And one of the things that I've proposed here, unsuccessfully because of funding, is to get our program certified as an advanced hip and knee certified program. And one of the biggest sticking points is getting the VA to allow us to join the American Joint Replacement Registry run by the Academy. And you can see our competition from an orthopedic point of view of all the advanced total hip and knee certified programs in our local community. We're right here in Milwaukee, and all the surrounding communities have a program that's, you know, certified. So, you know, so that's one of the things that I've run into. And, you know, we keep going back to what the VA's mission is. And the vision statement of the VHA is to be a benchmark of excellence, you know, patient-centered and evidence-based, and teamwork, collaboration, learning, discovery, and continuous improvement. You know, so, but what are our obstacles from a surgeon's point of view? Lack of time, again, is the biggest thing that we have the biggest problem with. And there's a couple things that we can say on the lack of time is most of my physicians are only working 1/8, 2/8, you know, providing clinical care, and the rest of the time they're over at the medical college. And so they don't really qualify under some of the restrictions as far as grants go, because I think some of the grants require greater than 6/8 worth of VA employment to apply for. You know, the development of research protocols and grant submission is very consuming. And, you know, having recently applied for a grant, I can't tell you the amount of time I spent at home after hours trying to write this grant up. And, you know, it takes away from family time and, you know, those type of opportunities that you can't get a lot of my physicians to do that time. And, you know, one of the thoughts that I had was, you know, if a research PhD could be given to us from the VA research area to coordinate with the attendings, the residents, the medical schools, you know, kind of service line specific research, we could get more activity done if we had someone doing the day-to-day operations of doing research. My service line doesn't have anybody to do the day-to-day, and I definitely don't have the time between my administrative duties and my clinical and teaching duties to actually do all the research. We need to get the VA to allow us to join databases, or for the VA itself to create databases, including patient-reported outcome measures, so that we can do longitudinal studies and allow us to get to be a center of excellence. And so from my perspective, I have found the whole IRB process very time consuming. I, shortly after getting here, I tried to do a prospective level 1 study with a company, and just getting through the information security issues, the CRADA agreement, and all that. It took essentially 2 years to finally say, okay, we can do this. And at that point, the industry partner said, this is taking too long, we're not interested, and they walked away. You know, so from my point of view, it's very time consuming. I don't have the time to do it as a clinician and educator, and we don't have, from a surgeon's service line, running the orthopedic service line here, to actually do research. On the other hand, since I've got here, I have been pushing for a motion analysis lab, and after 8 years of pushing for it in collaboration with Marquette University and the UWM and the medical college, we are finally in the process of actually building out a space for a gait motion analysis lab. So, you know, if you push long enough, maybe you can get something done.
Thanks. Yeah, I mean, I've heard that story. Your story is it's so common. I've heard it so much when I came to Hopkins. It's exactly what the people were telling me. And I just would make a couple of points. One is, I don't like the idea of hiring a PhD, a gun for hire. I think, first of all, it's kind of like, I remember somebody, when I went to the University of Cincinnati, I came as a basic scientist in endocrinology, and an orthopedic surgeon called me up and said, "You're a PhD, right? Can you set my lab up?" I mean, it's like, I was so insulted, but what better to do is to form teams. You use programs that exist, like John has done, and then you incentivize from both sides, and you get a much better quality. You're not going to get a good person if it's a gun for hire like that, I think. So, but I take your points. That it's a time problem, and I think you have to solve it with a team building program in some way.
Maybe Dr. Amendola.
Yeah, sure.
Go ahead.
No,
Yeah.
no, I think I enjoy. First of all, I'm not an orthopedic surgeon. I'll start with that because we've had all orthopedic surgeons, I think, speak on this call so far. I think Dr. Kibbe and I are the only vascular surgeons. Dr. Kibbe,
I'm not an
good
orthopedic
to see you.
surgeon.
Oh, okay, well, it's all right. Maybe I play one on TV. Just a couple comments. Thanks very much for putting the panel together. My background is basic science. I have 2 degrees in chemistry. I actually worked in industry designing drugs before I came to medical school. So I had a really good appreciation of what happens on the bench. I went through medical school at a time when it was kind of traditional to always have PhD, MDs and have this not be a problem. I remember a panel that Dr. Kibbe was on is saying, this is a problem. We have a big problem. And I was like, I didn't know we had a problem, but clearly we do. I work in the VA. I'm a vascular surgeon in Richmond, Virginia, the same institution Dr. Kibbe has her laboratory in. My whole take on this is a little bit different than everyone else. So I'm a clinical researcher, but I also do 3D printing for the VA as part of the Office of Advanced Manufacturing. So we have a lab in funding through joint incentive funding with DoD to support up to 4 residents per year. And we're in the midst now of converting that funding source either to another GIF with DoD or coming in within VA OAA or within a different funding source within VA. So my job has always been to promote clinical research, but also to appreciate what happens in PhD-based labs. So I'm the clinician guy who goes to those conferences and says, I really don't understand what you mean by this figure. So I push on people coming from basic science to say, explain it to me as a clinician and make it simple for the vascular surgeon in the room, which is usually the lowest thinking person in the room, but make it simple for me to understand what's going on. So, I try to advocate for our trainees in that structure. And then one final comment is VA has an opportunity, and we've used this within our lab now over the last 5 years, to recruit the next generation of surgeons because they don't all just want money. A lot of them want money, but they want balance and they want lifestyle and they want some element of mentorship, especially within surgery. So I think VA offers that. So it's a kind of a model where we're able to entice people coming out of after being training with us to come back to VA to consider the good things that they see in VA, not the onerous IRB that we deal with also here in Richmond, as Dr. Kibbe knows, but also to keep mid-career personnel like myself to prevent us from migrating away from VA. So these kind of opportunities and structures, I think, are pretty important. But I really enjoyed all the different perspectives from the panel and look forward to hearing some more.
That's an excellent point. That just the one follow-up on that is that this issue, I had it on one of the slides, I think, as a possible consideration for how, when we were, when you recruit an orthopedic surgeon, the 1 out of 10 or 1 out of 20, say it's a rare bird, right? But wants to do research. Well, give them a lab, give them a biostatistician, support that recruitment. And that would solve some of his problem. It wouldn't solve the time that he has to be in the lab, but it certainly would supplement and get somebody in that could do, could make a difference. And the VA could do something. I'm sure the VA, for all the points you made, the VA could do different things in that regard. But I do think, we go out and we spend a lot of money on basic science researchers and, millions, $1.5 million is the minimum. Why not do the same thing for the 1 in 20 that wants to do research as an orthopedic surgeon?
Tom, can I comment on that? Because
Yeah.
It's important what you just mentioned. Give them a lab, give them the space and time. Like the time isn't there. And you know what happens with that person? They come to the engineer and they say, this is what I want to do. How do I make this happen? And they don't have the time to dedicate to the project. They expect that the basic science engineer is going to be able to take that project.
Yeah,
forward.
I know. I've heard. Yeah, I get that too. I get it. Yeah.
Can I also make a comment though? So this is the part of that gets back to my introduction that Kimberly mentioned though. I am a firm advocate, as Michael just said, of particularly surgeon scientists going into the VA, because the VA is one of the last bastions where you can hire a surgeon full time and you can allocate some of their time dedicated for research. And the pressures to generate the work RVUs are not the same because it's a salaried system. Yeah. And so I am, any successes I have, I directly attribute to my early career having the privilege of being a surgeon in the VA, and that the VA afforded me part of my time was clinical, part of my time was designated research. And that let me have the successes I have had. So that's why, you know, Kimberly, Michael, those of you who know me know I'm incredibly grateful for that. And I wish more people would understand that that is available in the VA.
That's an excellent point. And, you know, I didn't mention it in one of the trickled out of the problems of the bench to bedside gap, but, you know, VAs were always built next to the academic institution, and they do it because you train residents. It was a part of the training. But there are some institutions they've drawn apart. People don't go there anymore. But this one, if you had a program and you just mentioned the way to do it, you could be the star. The VA could be the star in getting people there, and that would incentivize again interaction. So it's a way to build the bridge back.
Right, but Tom, I hate to say it, I'm gonna get back to money again.
Yeah,
I do, one of the problems that remains with the VA is the VA is still not paying physicians the compensation, say, that the AAMC pay tables are. And that is why there are some institutions where the academic affiliate is willing to supplement the difference, but there are other academic affiliates that are not. And it's a hard thing to ask, especially the surgeons and the high-paying disciplines, to go into the VA and be subject to those pay tables. I mean, I remember when there was the big raise in the pay tables, and that was like, I did a happy dance, you know, and the Association of VA Surgeons did happy dance. But they're behind the times when it comes to compensating the physician workforce.
Mm-hmm.
And that is definitely true. Our medical school is, you know, the orthopedic department really funds essentially the whole functioning of the medical school the way it is, because we're the high burners and churners. And most of my docs that work for me from the medical school, like I said, come over 1 to 2 days a week and provide clinical care, because they need to produce the RVUs over at the main house to produce their salary and produce the tax the dean takes from their salaries to fund all the departments that don't make their own salaries. And so it's a catch-22 running all the way around. And you know, you can't get a guy who's graduating out of residency program to take a salary less than 400K, which, you know, you can't make more than the president. And so, you know, high paying specialties, unless they're like myself, this is my second career, where I'm not worried about income as much as I was when I was 30 years old and having to pay off student loans and all the rest. So again, comes down to money, comes down to RVUs that you have to produce for your medical college. How much time are you willing to give to the VA at what discount, you know?
What is the difference of the AAMC tables? I mean, how much, what are we talking about? What's the difference?
It depends on the specialty. Oh, sorry, Melina. It depends on the specialty. So, I mean, this is my first year as faculty member. So I'm here in New Mexico at the VA and University of New Mexico. And it was kind of the first time the 2022 salary report, which, as we all know, is at least 2 years behind, or, you know, what accurate salaries are in the community. So the first time for plastic surgery that they actually started to the 25th percentile for an assistant professor in academic plastic surgery started to surpass the VA's ability to pay. And, you know, it's right there, but obviously spine, neurosurgery, cardiac, I mean, they've been beyond it for years. And I'm fortunate that I'm in a position where I'm exceeding 1 FTE, which, you know, institutions have different rules on what that can be, but it's kind of in some ways amusing that as a first year faculty member, I'm already at 1.2 FTE between my two positions. But that's what I, you know, kind of what I need to do. So 25% is what Hopkins pays. That's right in the range of what Hopkins pays.
Yeah, Alex, don't say that on this call. There's government people on this call.
Oh, terribly sorry.
Joe, we have to hear from you. Where are you, Joe?
I'm here. I'm gonna scrap my slides because I don't think there's any need to go into my background as much as I put in there, and it's really hard to follow this group and the knowledge they have because I'm not in the clinical realm. You know, I was trained as an engineer first as an aerospace engineer, and I can go into many stories of what that looks like, but I made the transition into biomedical engineering 20 years ago. And that's where I've been ever since. I'm fortunate to be on campus with a large school of medicine, the IU School of Medicine, and also on campus with a VA center. So my career as a biomedical engineer was tied to my collaborations I built through the medical school and ultimately led me into the VA system about, now it's almost 7-8 years ago, and ultimately to my own merit award in January. So I kind of seen a spectrum of what it looks like to be, in an engineering environment where there's strict engineering-based research, biomedical engineering, which crosses the boundary into human healthcare and healthcare delivery, working alongside a medical school where folks are mostly focused on basic benchtop work, and then more recently into a more clinical realm. So my experience with the clinician scientist comes in two forms. And the first of that is with training. I've been fortunate to be involved with the MSTP program at the School of Medicine, which trains both folks that are going into medical school departments, but it also has a joint program with the Weldon School of Biomedical Engineering in West Lafayette. So we get some really highly qualified biomedical engineers who have this desire, this strong desire, this energy to go and become the best clinical, or clinician scientists they can become. And I watch them come through, and they're trained and they do great, and they go through the rest of the training, and then they get their first position, and they've got that protected time guaranteed, and they're going to do this work. And every single one of them so far that I've seen come through the program eventually feels the pull of the clinic and of their departments and of the time that's necessary to serve on the clinical side, and the research goes away. And it's happened, more times than I can count. My other experiences with, and as I mentioned before, my area is in orthopedic biomechanics. So you've got these orthopedic surgeons who are gung-ho, they want to do research, they're excited about it, they've got an idea, let's do it. And my experience with all of the orthopedic researchers I've worked with is they have this super high energy that comes in spurts. They will walk into your office and drop 45 ideas on your desk, and then you won't hear from them for a month. And then they'll come back and say, well, are we ready to go with these 45 experiments? And I'm like, no, that's not the way science works, right? We have to have a plan, we have to execute. And it's difficult to want to continue collaborating with those folks, but they desperately need it because most of them don't have labs, and they have these ideas that they want to see come to fruition, but they don't have the time to actually do it properly. And this comes back to the point that I've heard over and over and over, the lack of time and the value there for them. So I approach these questions. What is the value add for them? What can I do to incentivize that person to want to stay involved? Someone says my video off. My video's on.
Yes.
How do you incentivize them to want to stay involved? And I have not come to a conclusion that works yet. So I'll stop now. But
Joe, I just want to pick up on that. One of the things we've noticed is the faculty, the surgeons that complete, or members of the team that complete our training, the T32 that we had at Hopkins, and like say we had probably now 8 faculty surgeons who actually trained a person. They get it then. The culture starts to change, but you have to have that. They have to go through that training process. It's just, you're not going to get, without that, it just doesn't happen. John, you have the same experience, right?
Correct.
Is anybody, before we go into this next phase, I mean, we heard some really good points, and I hope this is a recorded thing, so there's a couple of themes that are coming out, but I wanted to give it. Where are we going with this? I mean, this is for the VA, but I think it's broader than that in some ways. And what I would love to see, Melina, I'm looking at you, to change, to really knock somebody's hit somebody over the head. We need deans to get involved. We need. I know I get convinced. I'm Mark Glad I bet to do something. But something at the very end of this, it would be nice to have. First of all, we should write something up. I mean, I think this should be just not sitting around. We should collect our ideas and write it formally. But I would like to see a group of people maybe organize a meeting or go to, the people that could change things. And I'm not exactly sure, but it can't come from me. It has to come from a higher, somebody with clout, I think.
I would love for us to, as a group, put together, a couple. If we're going to advocate for anything, one thing I do know is we need to pick only 1 or 2 things, because if you have a long laundry list, we'll never be successful. So if we're going to advocate for something, I mean, if there was support, for example, to advocate that we eliminate the NIH salary cap, I am all in, because I've been wanting to do that. And I've dropped kernels at many places, or something easier, completely eliminating, you know, like we talked about, the number of years requirement. Or if we were to pick one thing as a group and write a white paper, I'm all in. And I'm sure we could easily get other people, if we wanted to keep it with VA only, we could easily get other people with VA affiliations to jump on.
And I bet there's an editor in JAMA Surgery that would be advocating for that, right?
Yeah, but I would say we'd want to go to a bigger, well, actually, no, this is a surgery focused interest group. However, some of the things we're talking about are broad, right?
Yeah, they are.
All of research. And
Kimber, I mean, I'm sitting in the VA. This is a VA initiative, and some of it will, benefit the VA. We can figure out how to do it, but it's broader than that. We just heard, I mean, I think what we should come up with, and I think you're right, pick a couple of topics and write about it and publish it. Not because these white papers just never have a life unless you get them in print somewhere.
Or if we really want to go big and advocate for something like eliminating the NIH salary cap because of the negative detrimental effect on the surgical specialties, we could get all of the big surgical specialties to join and sign in on something like that. I mean, we can get the college, we can get the orthopedic, the plastics, the vascular. I mean, we can get them all.
And I would suggest that instead of having some of the different grants, or at least having the VA grants not require 6/8 or greater, salary positions, because
that's a good one too.
Get a salaried doctor who's young enough in their career, willing to take the VA salary just to do research.
Yeah, Carl, you bring up a super important point. So Kimberly, I'm going to turn to you. Why? Why do we have that requirement to have, it's 5/8 if you're going to have a VA merit?
Right. And I want to address, when you're a career development person, right, it's a sort of, we ask for 6/8, which is 75%, which is consistent with the KO8, right? 75% of your effort. And then we do ask clinical to pick up the other 25, or the 2/8, because we're asking for a commitment from clinical to move this person at the end of that career into the clinic. But we do have options where we can have somebody less than 5/8, but we have to have very good reasons. And
let me, before you go to point 2, let me just point out to you, the NIH for most surgical specialties has gone the way of reducing it down to 50%.
Yeah.
Not
like
all,
I said,
most. One by one, they've been reducing it to 50%.
Yeah. And so I kind of went out and looked at what other programs required. They said 75%, kind of like a blanket. But like you say, we may need to have language in place, because I was hearing other specialties, neurosurgery, ophthalmic. We can't get ophthalmic surgeons in the VA because we can't pay them enough and things. So I was hearing that there are specialties. And again, can we reduce it? So, I mean, I'm just kind of collecting data and say, is this something that we can do and then offer like this? I don't want to say lower commitment, but
yeah. Let me ask you though, for there's career development awards, but what about VA merits? To have a VA merit, you have to have 5/8, but yet a VA merit is equivalent to an R01. An R01 standard is 25%. That would be 2/8. So these are some concrete things, and I'm serving on the NRAC right now.
Yeah,
I can help to address these things there. Why can't we
Melina,
change that?
Well, but it's 5/8, and if you have an R01, we give you back 3/8 protected time. So it's costing us 5/8, but we're giving you back 3/8 or something. Some magic happens in the background.
No, but you're looking at it in a different lens. So we're looking at it, if you have a position at an academic affiliate, and you want to also do research in your VA position. So why not allow someone to have 2/8 of a VA job and have that be the VA merit time? Because that is 25% of a VA job. I think that's how many of us on the call might be looking at it, different from you.
Yeah, these are structural impediments that disincentivize. I mean, they have to be. Yeah. By the way, I want to throw it.
I know very well, Jason.
There are other people online here. Can we have some? Are there questions from the other people who haven't spoken yet? Anybody?
Anybody can speak up, raise your hand, put it in the chat. We want to hear from you.
Well, I'll just speak up briefly. Sorry, I'm in the Seattle airport. Just went through security, so I've kind of been on and off of the call. But you know, I'm a transplant surgeon, and I'm at the Tucson VA and University of Arizona. You know, I think a couple of things that were mentioned. I think in terms of the mentorship model, kind of as a friendly corollary to the discussion from UCLA. Back when I was at Northwestern with Dr. Kibbe, we had a T32 in Department of Surgery, particularly in transplant, where we had kind of a matrixed model of mentorship, and that might be one model to use for VA research. If we look at the matrix model of kind of the academic medical center or something, we kind of distill that down to mentorship, where one person is mentoring in surgical career, one person in basic science, and another person in how to be a productive VA researcher, as an example. You know, I wonder along those lines if we could actually develop a T32, maybe a nationwide T32 for trainees within surgical research within the VA. There's been some success on different academic medical centers getting together for a group-wide T32 or UC2 through NIDDK. And if we had something where we could band together maybe 5 VA stations for a group T32, where we could then share best practices and share mentorship.
Yeah, good idea. Good idea.
Yeah. Yes, and I think that the funding level is you know, quite challenging with the 5/8 and so forth. We tend to look at the salary structures separately from the VA versus the medical school. So for our basic scientists and physicians who get a VA grant, it's a net positive in their you know, for their income. So it's an incentive there specifically.
Thanks, Jason.
Sorry to have a whole bunch of ideas, and I agree with Dr. Kibbe's sentiment that when you put forth a lot of ideas, they're not likely to get all funded. So
right.
So we
pick
should
your
kind
target.
of follow,
Yeah,
you know, what's the main target that we want to do. But that's just my 5 cents, because I'm going to have to catch an airplane soon from the WFC.
Dr. Roebling, you're in the dark. Do you have any comments?
No, came in late, just interested in this. You know, I have a T32 and we have one slot that's dedicated to an orthopedic surgeon in between PGY2 and PGY3. And so, you know, we're working on the same issue here, is trying to get more orthopedic surgeons into research. So I don't know that I have anything to add or any pearls here, but it's good to hear that we're dealing with the same, not good, but reassuring that we're dealing with the same issues here.
Maybe what I could suggest is that we've heard a lot of really good ideas. Some of them came up over and over again, and we'll have to go back over. I'll go back and review the tape, as it were, and come up with some points that, you know. But I think how many of you, is anybody going to the ORS this year in Long Beach? Wherever the next, I think we need another get together after we consolidate some of these things, because now what do you do with it? I mean, the problems are there. We kind of know what the big hurdles are, and you know what Dr. Kibbe says is to pick the biggest targets and then try to solve them. And remember, it's one or some at the VA that you might go after, but some are broader than that. And I think some of these, I was asking recently, I couldn't believe it. Why are there so few T32s? You know, you have to basically knock somebody out at NIAMS to get one. It's crazy, and they're only $400,000. It doesn't pay anything. Who in their right mind would write one? So again, there's some things that relate to the institutes at the NIH. Some things relate, you know, to the VA. I really like the idea of these more of a multi kind of center training program, because that has real advantages in terms of, you know, consolidating efforts, what works, you know, and sharing the kind of the experience. I don't know much about that. What you mentioned that. Well, anyway, what do you think the next step should be? Yeah.
Yeah, I just had an epiphany too, that we should all recognize that if we're going to advocate for some big change that impacts the NIH that has to do with surgeon scientists, today is the day, because as you all know, our director who just got nominated is a surgeon scientist herself.
Oh, yeah.
So if we ever have an opportunity to make a movement with the NIH, it would be under her leadership, I hope.
I think one of the things that this group could do also for some of us who aren't surgeon scientists, but looking to promote further research at the VA, is creating a how-to best practices. What's the best way to start from the ground up when orthopedic research has been missing at our institution for over 30 years. You know, I think the papers that we recently published are the first papers out of our orthopedic section at the VA in over 30 years.
And some of these things, like writing a training grant, John and everyone, those and Alex, you guys, this is a labor of love that should not be done by young people. Ruin their careers. You have to have old guys like me who like this kind of stuff. And it's, believe me, now I was so enthusiastic that I took the job at Maryland simply to develop this program, and now I'm realizing it's really hard. So you know, you have to. I think the training program and these there are mechanisms, and I really repeat. It's something about the pressure of getting renewed that this money goes a long way, and Clemens is responsible for getting it renewed. That pressure really helps, but you don't want a young person to do it. You want to have a senior person who, and they're hard to come by. I looked at myself and said, "What are you doing?" After it's really hard. Can I suggest that that Kimberly and I group up, we review the tape, and we try to generate some summary points. And then we have to, I think it's important to revisit this with maybe with another Zoom. We'll have to see. But I'm not yet clear as to the best approach, except the time, as you mentioned, maybe right now for some of these things. So we can't let it, we'll do it fairly quickly here. Does anybody else have anything? Yeah.
Yeah, Tom, how about this? You and Kimberly develop the list of ideas that we just all pitched, probably about 5 to 10 ideas. And we could go through a series of straw poll voting through email, or you could send it out. So we could start narrowing the list down to see what, as a group, we're all most passionate about and what we all think would move the needle the biggest.
Good idea.
And Dr. Kibbe, are you thinking, like, I mean, we have a couple of agencies, that we're thinking. So there's the VA agency, and then of course there's the HHS. So I want to make sure, like, it's good if we can do it in some sort of, kind of federal wide approach. Obviously, there are DoD surgeons out there who get deployed before they can get any work done. I'm sorry we don't have anybody from San Diego, but they do a lot with Navy Health. So there's a lot of crosstalk happening in the military that we benefit as VA, because many of them transition to VA. So there are other federal agencies maybe interested in this, and again, translating real world experiences back to the bench or back into the models and things like that. And I'm thinking of our friends in like combat casualty care and forward operating spaces, and who are benefiting from working in trauma centers and things like that, bringing that experience and working on really, really hard problems, and which of course have a big impact for our military personnel too.
So they have an interest. I will say many of the things that we talked about here aren't important or relevant for the DoD. And I will say the DoD leads the way in the fact that they do not have a salary cap. But they also don't have those career development. So there's several things we talked about here that just don't apply to the DoD. But I applaud the DoD on some of their strategies. Their challenge is it's year by year, and you never know if you're going to get money the next year. That's what makes the DoD really, really hard.
Hey, I want to thank everybody for getting together. This has really been fun, and lots of great ideas, and the people who I don't see and have contributed as well. If you have any comments that you want to get to, just email Kimberly or myself or both, and we will come up, what, in a week?
Give me till December. I'm running marathon.
Trying to do it quickly, but again, I like the idea of coming up with these points and then voting on them, but I would love to see that these points or these targets that we go after apply. Not, I mean, I know we're in the VA and that's what we're here for, but the structural impediments in some of these grants apply to the NIH as well. And I'd like to think if we could come up with a more broad approach to change some of these things that have really limited the values. Yeah, and that's the kind of thing I'd like to see. But we'll come up with some points and get them back to you as soon as we can.
I want to just jump in here because we did talk about, I think it was Karl said, about paying back your loans, so NIH has that loan repayment program, but also VA has what they call, education debt reduction or something. So there are certain, incentives. Maybe Dr. Amendola, you know a little bit more about this. And so there are mechanisms within the government to retain or attract people. Obviously, we're in hiring mode a lot, but we do have mechanisms to do kind of student loan payback. I'm not sure how competitive is Dr. Amendola. I'm not sure if you've had any experience, or Karl, with those programs.
Yeah, well, I've just pulled a faculty member from private practice back to VA who came from a traditional training program at University of Pittsburgh and then Cleveland Clinic. I went to private practice. I was able to bring her back. So depends on the center and the backing of the center, but there are national programs. In her case, $50K per year, up to 4 years to $200K, which is a nice chunk of change when you're trying to pull back surgeons into VA practice. And then also refocus them, I think, in a lot of ways toward an academic bent. But there are those programs, and there's a lot of also competitive nursing programs as well within VA to get additional training within your specialty as well. So that money is there. You just got to look for it and find it, and also make sure you have your center backing when you undertake it.
Can I add one other thing? This is just because Tom, you mentioned ORS. So one of the interesting positions I've found myself in, which I never really thought, over the past 15 years of medical school and training, is that as a plastic surgeon, hand surgeon, and MD PhD, where my PhD was in bone development and fracture repair, the vast majority of my current basic science research falls in musculoskeletal, which is why you see me at ASBMR and ORS. And yet there are stipulations in societies, including many of the OREF grants, where you have to be a practicing orthopedic surgeon. And I've talked with Kurt about this, current president of ORS. It's not the first time this has happened. When I applied for an F30 during my PhD years, because it was cleft palate research largely, it went to the NIDCR, which stipulated that only DDS or DMD PhDs could qualify. And so it's kind of a not so amusing pattern to be falling into. So I just wanted to bring that up since you mentioned ORS, because there are these very weird exclusion criteria that kind of come up, that it really should be based on, just like, is your research appropriate for the meeting? Is your research appropriate for the society or the institute to fund? Not necessarily, are you, practicing in X department or Y department? I just wanted to bring that up.
And it's not, I mean, it's across the board. I mean, the training grants themselves, the T32 slots, a postdoc is a slot, right? Well, turns out that biomedical engineers often don't do postdocs. They go right to Google, right? So it's like, really, some of these things have to be rethought. And that's what I meant by going broader than just the VA. I need at some stage to convince these people at the NIH their grants are 40 years old and they haven't rethought them since. So you're right. I mean, it's exactly what we experienced. We couldn't get public health was similar. You didn't even have the right slot. You should be more flexible in the slots you're allowed to use.
And we haven't touched data science, and all the new stuff that's coming out and things like that. And then Melina, I mean, what about the Association of VA Surgeons? Would this be another venue, again, to have these kinds of discussion? And again, we have a lot of VA people, at least in my screen, across the screen there. It may be another opportunity to discuss, because you really do have fingers in all the pies. So they do hear the message loud and clear, but it is very, very VA. I'm not sure. I mean, a lot of people, like they say in VA, once you're VA, you're always VA, even if you leave VA. And I know a lot of them return to that meeting. So that's yet another interesting meeting to have these kinds of discussions, but that would be at a later stage of ORS. I think that's in April. Or
yeah, and sometimes when you go to the ORS, I mean, we know now, just after this discussion, we kind of like have an advanced education. You know, we know all kind of on the same page. You go to the ORS and start presenting this stuff, you get all kinds of comments, and it won't be that productive. What you need to do, we need to get to the next level, and like Melina said, let's find out what the points are we want to address and go after them in the right way with all the power we can. Because I mean, John, I'm going to die before you know, this is getting too long. We need to solve some of these problems, right?
Yeah.
So,
well,
does anybody have any final thoughts before we
I
adjourn?
just want to make one comment.
Yeah, go
but-
ahead. And then
no.
I'll comment about the ABAS. Go ahead.
So I think that there is one thing that money cannot buy, and that's the determination for a surgeon to want to do research. And I think that what we need to really think about is how do we get that fire in the belly early during the career? And what is it that we as a community need to do to make certain that we perpetuate that? Because this is not going to be a one-shot thing. It's going to be a generational thing. And so in thinking forward, we need to also think sustainability. I'm telling you, we can hire a group of people to do experiments in a laboratory while someone is in the OR, but we need that someone to be able to want to continue to lead a research program and want to make patient lives better. So this is what I wanted to tell you, is that yes, we can address things with money, but there is something that money cannot buy. And that's the determination to want to be a physician scientist. Once we identify that, what should we do as a community to never lose that jewel is very important to also.
It's role models. Role models, it's all about role models, but it's not for everybody. Remember, we're trying to train the next generation of leadership in the major academic centers. We're not training private practitioners. I mean, let's get real. This is not for everybody, but it's for nobody. We have to make some progress, but I think it's a matter of role models. And you mentioned Regis, or people like Randy Rosier. Those are the people that you need, that need to run programs, and that's how you get the few people who do have that inclination to do it, and then take the impediments away so they can do it. So that's what I think. I don't think this is for everybody. I can tell you that. And we've lost a generation. Basically, we've lost a generation of people. Oops.
Yeah.
I do agree with you all. It's not for everyone, but I think we have a heck of a lot more people who have the fire in the belly and want to do it, but the financial pressures are just too great. And it's really hard to expect somebody who's trained to be a neurosurgeon or an orthopedic surgeon, right, and they see the AAMC pay tables, and then expect them to walk away from that and take a lower salary to do research. That there's a dichotomy. It's not fair to ask those people to do that. So I do think that until we address as a community and as a country, if we do not address these financial challenges, surgeon scientists are going to die out as a breed by and large, because we already are. I did want to say on the ABAS, so the next meeting is in April in Miami, and if you do want this to be, say, a panel discussion, I can guarantee you it would be a very robust panel discussion, but it would be something that we would need to pitch probably now, because they're probably starting to put that program together soon.
So
the program coordinator this year?
No, just to jump in on that, we've already selected our panels for this year in Miami, Dr. Kibbe. Far be it for me to interrupt you or to get in the way of your thoughts, but definitely for the following year. I mean, that's where I met Dr. Potter when she was there last year in Wisconsin. So definitely we will have an exciting panel this year on the Community Care Act, but also on 3D printing was our other thing. So
that's great.
Definitely.
Michael, are they set? Are they completely already solidified, all the panel discussions?
Well, that's probably above my pay grade to say that it's definitely said, Dr. Kibbe. So I think if you push your will on to some of those on the AVAS panel, they probably would consider it. But yeah, no, as of now, we've had 2 panels. I think there might be thoughts for a 3rd panel. That's always an option. If not this year, then maybe the following year. But I think this is an important concept, and I think it's an important thing for VA writ large to think about and to offer and to support. As has been evidenced by the investigators, the thinkers, and the trailblazers here that have identified a problem and need to continue to battle it.
Well put.
I have a thought that, based off of, the whole team approach to the research, and, when you're dealing with service lines at particular VAs like ours, to develop a research team between the clinical service line. It's not so much maybe a specific clinical researcher getting plugged in. That's a one-off. Whereas if you bring the research into a monthly or quarterly service line meeting, like I have every Thursday morning, and once a month, okay, here's our research team. We get together, discuss what's going on currently, what progress have we made, and what's the next project that we want to start to address. Then you got the whole team together, whether it's your biostatisticians and your system data analyst people and whoever else you have in your team. I don't have a team yet, so I get to develop this and choose the team, but this is something that I would see from a service line, and we want to do orthopedic research. It's going to be a whole service line project rather than just one person.
So Kimberly, is there a way to think in terms of collective effort where a team of let's say co-PIs, instead of being obligated to invest 5/8 on a grant, would be able to put in 2/8 each, for example, and then that will release some funds to be able to recruit competent collaborators or even personnel to be able to do that work, because the rigidity eventually of the effort, which does not fit very well with every subspecialty, let aside medicine versus surgery versus no clinical duties, is something to really think about, because it may provide a solution to a problem.
So I think the recommendations of the group will go a long way towards convincing our leadership of what needs to be done. It's not going to come from me. We've really plumbed the depths here of what is needed to maintain a robust program, and perhaps we can then sort of formalize it. Like I said before, we, thanks to Ralph De Palma, he told Dr. Bauer, please extend the deadline from 10 years, but with a waiver to explain why this person had such a long training program and not disenfranchise them from accessing the career development. I think VA has been very generous with respect to our salaries, but we can't fight against those pay scales. But perhaps, like you said, if we downgrade that a little bit, maybe not commit to the, and again, it has, I want to start with maybe the high paying surgical things. I don't want to disenfranchise the other groups, but maybe we do have to downgrade the 8 so that they can pick it up maybe at the university or something. But we definitely want them to get VA clinic hours as well, and how we would share that, right? So share the cost across multiple systems, who are invested in seeing these people become the future leadership of academic medicine. So Again, this white paper, these ideas, writing them down, I can, then take that back to our VA people and of course discuss it maybe at the VA surgeons meeting and get some sort of groundswell. At least this is what I can do here. I'm happy to share with colleagues in the other agencies, very friendly with NIEMS and NIDCR and Heart, Lung, and Blood, and say, this is what we're doing in the VA. And even if it's just a spark, maybe, it might force them to revisit their own training programs. And then you guys will work from the outside in your professional capacity.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I mean, maybe there's a couple the targets may be similar, but we may go one approach to the VA and then one is broader to the end. I don't think we should, some of these things have to be solved at multiple levels, not just the VA.
Yeah.
So I'm going to have to wrap this up because I got to catch a plane too. Listen, I want to thank everybody. This is fantastic. I mean, I have never, I think we got the perfect group of people. I really thank everybody for participating and taking the 2 hours out of your busy schedule. It's been fun for me. That's part of what I think about. I'll have to go back and think about it again tonight.
You're gonna have a long flight.
Right. Again, but send thoughts, emails to us. We'll
ideas, put them in writing in case it wasn't verbalized, but yes, please share your ideas. And I don't know if we had any comments from the participants. Everybody was just really quiet.
And email us your comments. Thanks again, everybody.
Thank you very much, guys.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thanks for joining. Appreciate it.
Bye.